We're waiting for you, Ryan. No. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for attending today's open forum. We have three particular topics to address with you today. I'll do the first two, having to do with where we are with the preparation for our 2013-2014 budget, and what I'm going to be taking to the Planning and Budget Committee next week as a proposal for Phase 2 of the Budget Reduction Plan. I also want to do an update on accreditation, because every day something new is transpiring, and I just returned from a conference for Northern California presidents, and we had an update from the Accrediting Commission about some things that are coming down the pike that we'll be taking into consideration. And then the major portion of today will be devoted to the work that's being done on revising the college mission, which is the most important document we have as an institution, because everything we do has to be driven from the mission statement. And quite frankly, our current mission statement doesn't meet any of the tests of a good mission statement by accreditation standards, Ed Code, or the Chancellor's Office. So in our integrated planning model, it called for the beginning of this spring to revise our mission statement in preparation for the work we're going to be doing to revise our strategic plan for 14-16, which we'll start work on quite soon. So so John Cascamo and his task force have been working on the commission. Will be here and take over to go through an exercise with us for getting some feedback and some input regarding the latest draft of that mission statement. So let me turn to the first topic. As you know, back in December, the Board of Trustees approved the long-term budget reduction plan, which is a 5-year plan of front-loading the reductions of $1.6 million in structural changes. That means permanent changes. That goes out of the budget for 5 years, which would address an $8 million anticipated shortfall by 5 years out. So that was the strategy behind the budget reduction plan. And so of that $1.6 million target, 50% of that was targeted towards academic reductions and 50% for operational reductions. And that was also to address another law, which we call the 50% law, in which 50% of general fund expenditures have to be spent in the classroom, primarily in faculty salaries. So if you're not spending 50%, then you get penalized economically for not complying with that law. So it's a balance, especially during a time when we've had to do so much program reduction. Every time we eliminate classes from the class schedule, which has been the way the state has been defunding us, that's been eroding that expenditure on the academic side of the 50% law. And so what's happened, we've had to reduce operational costs on the other side, which has impacted a lot of personnel, a lot of positions in the classified management roles. So we want to get to a point where that doesn't happen anymore. So that's part of the outcome of the long-term plan. I took to the Board of Trustees Phase 1 of the budget reduction plan in December. And that was the number of the programs that I was recommending to be eliminated and those modified. That action was taken. The Vice President of Academic Affairs and the deans have been implementing that plan in terms of eliminating the programs, but also identifying those students who were caught in this transition period. And so they've developed what we call a teach-out plan, identifying courses that will continue to offer this current semester, summer, and possibly fall in order to allow those students to complete their program. Not all students were accommodated because they either had only taken 1 or 2 courses, or some had declared a major but never taken a course in the major. So it's difficult to accommodate those particular needs. So now we've been working on phase 2, which is an $800,000 target. And I just want to share with you kind of in a broad stroke, because I don't want to preempt the work that I'm asking the Planning and Budget Committee to do next Tuesday, because I plan on taking a recommendation to the Board of Trustees on April 10th, which is the next board meeting that we have. Normally it would be April 3rd, but that falls during spring break, so the board has adjusted its meeting schedule to meet on April 10th. Of that $800,000 target, I had broken that up into 4 segments. My cluster, the President's cluster, and the 3 Vice President clusters. My cluster had a target of $100,000, and what we've been able to do is come up with about $125,000 in reductions. The bulk of that in board elections. $115,000 from board election line item budget and $10,000 from marketing and communications, which is in my cluster also. As you recall, in 2014, we will change the way in which our trustees are elected. Up until this point, the trustees run by district, just as Dr. George ran from District 2, which is the coast region. She was still elected at large. Everybody in the county had an opportunity to vote for that trustee. Starting in 2014, trustees will still run by district, but only those that live in the district will vote on that candidate. So it will be managed and controlled, and it will be truly a constituent representative. Right now, you could have somebody running, as Barbara did in Region 2, but have a whole support system elsewhere in the county, and that could overpower any other candidate that might have a localized support in terms of that person getting any recognition. All right, so that's what is going to take place in 2014, which is when the next board election is. It only happens on the even years. So we'll have 2 seats that will be up in 2014, and then in 2016 we'll have the other 3 seats up again. So it'll be exercised for the first time. Normally it costs us anywhere from $200,000 to $250,000 a year for a board election. That's because we have to pay for all the precincts in the county every time we do that. So now when we're only doing it by a certain district, it'll reduce tremendously the cost of actually delivering that election in that region only. So that goes to the budget reduction plan. The Vice President of Administrative Services, Tony Summer, her target was $400,000. And she's achieved that through reductions in her office of about $50,000, computer services of about $40,000, facilities, which includes Terry Reese's operations, of about $50,000, fiscal services, and primarily in temporary help, advertising and supplies, about $30,000. The bookstore, that's a revenue-supported program, but they also have a postage, general fund postage area, which is a $10,000. And human resources in their marketing, advertising, and printing of about $10,000. And then instead of continually to reduce expenditures, their area also looked at ways in which we could increase revenue, which is another way of offsetting the expenditures. So there are 4 areas in which Tony and her staff looked at increasing revenue, and that had to do with convenience fee, which is the fee charged for using a credit card. Non-resident tuition, the board has already taken action on that. That should increase our revenue about $150,000 next year. We're revising the use of facilities charges, the rental of facilities for the campus hasn't been addressed for a long time. That's another $11,000. And we are looking to increase student parking fees for summer, and also for summer for students, and motorcycle for all year round. And that's another $20,000 of income. So that reaches her goal of $400,000, which turns out to be about $402,000. In the area of academic affairs, their target was $150,000. They did a big cut last year in the whole revamping of the division assistant process and that whole restructuring and reorganization. In the operations area, we had one of the programs that was eliminated was the culinary arts program. That depended on our ability to lease facilities from the Paso Robles Unified School District with their culinary kitchen. We will not be leasing that facility anymore. That's a little over $20,000 a year. That went to that reduction. The rest of it in the academic affairs is in personnel. We have a classified layoff that I'll be recommending to the board. This is a result of the program reduction. There was a lab tech in broadcast and communication. That position will be eliminated. I've already met with that individual and we'll be taking that recommendation to the board on April 10th. In the restructuring with the retirement of one of the division chairs in business education, academic affairs is moving forward with a reorganization, restructuring of the divisions and clusters, which will eliminate one division chair position, and that's about $40,000 reduction. And then by the classified or the faculty contract, there's a contract about how North County coordinators are determined, which has to do with a number of full-time equivalent faculty within an academic area. Since we've been reducing programs over the last few years, there are two areas that are no longer eligible for a coordinator, so there will be two coordinator positions that will be eliminated just by exercising and following the contract, and that's about $45,000. So they achieved a level of the $150,000. In student services, Sandy McLaughlin and her staff, they had a $150,000 target. In operations, we're negotiating a reduced lease in Arroyo Grande with the Lucio Marsh School District to reduce the cost of the rental of that since we're renting fewer facilities since the program has reduced. That's a savings of $25,000. There was still a line item within the Vice President's office for temporary help, excessive amount for temporary help. That's been removed of $45,000. And then there's some miscellaneous and other operational costs of about $5,000. We're planning on increasing the transcript fee to students. I think it's like from $5.25 to $6, something like that. And that'll raise about $10,000 of new income. And then the remaining reduction in student services is centered around personnel reductions. Since I have not talked to the individuals yet, that's scheduled for later today, I can't tell you exactly what position we're looking at, which will result in a layoff. But it involves 5 people in 3 different positions. We're making some movements and changes within the classified area, both in admissions and records and DSPS, to be able to achieve the $65,000 savings. And that meets their $150,000. So at this point, with an $800,000 overall target, we're sitting at about $824,000 of planned and anticipated reductions. When these are finally done, that's when the fine-tuning of what it actually costs or what we actually save, but that's the target. So between Phase 1 and Phase 2, we're well on track to meet the obligation of our budget reduction plan of $1.6 million. I will be taking this proposal to Planning and Budget on Tuesday, and I will be asking them to endorse it. They have the prerogative of either endorsing it or offering a different recommendation. And then I will take that recommendation, then I have 3 choices. I can accept the recommendation, I can reject it, or I can modify it, and before I take a proposal to the board on April 10th. So that's kind of where we're going at this point. So I just want to make sure that you were clear on what areas and what avenues. As I have met with the various employee groups, especially Management Senate and Classified Union, I've made it very clear that I have no intention to recommend any type of a furlough program for management or classified employees for 13-14. That means as of June 30, the current agreement with Classified Union and the current imposition that I placed on management and confidentials will be lifted. So on July 1st, everybody will feel like they got a raise. But we all know that's just a figment of our imagination. It just means we're being restored back to where we were, 12 months ago or 12 months from then. So anyway, that's the current proposal plan and my commitment to our staff. Any questions regarding that reduction plan? Okay. So let me move on to accreditation. How many saw the paper this morning? This was the front page of the local. I expected this to be on the front page of Section A, but this will be okay. This is really nice, but you know what? How we got there wasn't nice. So I kind of have to look at this with mixed feelings. One is, the only reason we got there is because we were in the trenches of despair caused by our own lack of ability to comply with standards. But because of the Herculean efforts that have been accomplished by all of you and the leadership of Deb and Kevin, we were able to create really a model outcome. And what I want to make sure that I impose upon you and impress upon you is the fact that your efforts as a college are being recognized throughout the state. I just returned from a president's meeting for Northern California, and we are being talked about. We are being congratulated. We are being lauded as, this is the way you do it. This is the way colleges have to respond. And we weren't there for a while. We were still in a disarray of belief, commitment, and sincerity about what we had to do. We spent the morning with a team from College of Sequoias who went from warning to show cause. A huge jump. That's worse than a fiscal cliff. That's a shock. That's one of those shocking things. We at least were prepared by going from warning to probation and so on, but this gets your attention right away. So they were here this morning. Their president, their vice president of academic affairs, who's their ALO, and there was a marketing person, and then a faculty representative. Were here to meet with various counterparts from our team to get some strategies about what they needed to do, identify what some of their core issues were that we might be able to offer suggestions. Fortunately, they've had the good wisdom to hire Dr. Eva Conrad also to assist them in their planning process. So that was the first attaboy compliment to them, as they reached out and got some really talented and quality help. But it's never over. As we know that, we still have work to do, and our Accreditation Steering Committee is working very hard now, and many of you are also working hard on the development of the self-evaluation for the 2014 comprehensive review. I hope you read the most recent progress report, an update from Deb and Kevin about where things are in terms of the process. We have three things going on. One is the preparation for our 2014. Second one is developing a response for the follow-up that we still have to do to close out our show cause report and eliminate the warning. That'll be due on October 15th. And then we also have an ACCJC annual report that's due every March 31st, which has to do with the academic and operational side. Then we also have a fiscal report that's intertwined in this. So that is due on March 31st. So in a couple of weeks, that'll be due to the Commission office. The pressure is still coming from the U.S. Department of Education. I was in a session yesterday with Barbara Bina, who's the president of ACCJC, and she was highlighting some of the areas that the U.S. Department of Education is going to be leaning on for all the regional accrediting agencies. They're also going to be streamlining the actual standards, not eliminating pieces of it, but reorganizing it so that everything appears to be equally as important as other parts. What they're finding is that the way that the accreditation standards are spelled out, they have a standard out in 4 major standards, and then there's sub-standards A, B, C, and so on. Then there's sub-standards 2, 3, I, double I, and so on. And what they've been finding in the field that when something is buried down there as a third level compliance issue, it's being deemed to be not as important as one that is higher in the hierarchy. And that's not to be misconstrued. So they're going to be restructuring the format to bring things more up so that they're clear, and they reduce redundancy, because we've seen within the standards things are repeated over and over again in various parts of it. They're going to eliminate the opening long paragraph which kind of describes the standard and get right to the chase as to what the elements are that you need to be addressing. That'll come out in 2014. We will not be under obligation to respond to that format because we'll already have been well into it. But schools that come up against their comprehensive reviews following that will be held to that new format. So we still have our work cut out for us. I encourage all of you to take the opportunity to volunteer to serve on a standard team. It's a great learning process. It gives you a real sense of ownership and opportunity to see what it takes to respond and understand the question and how our response has to be prepared and the evidence secured that documents and supports that statement that we've made so that it stands the test of a visiting team coming in and validating what we said we've actually done through the evidence that we've shown. So that becomes a really important part of your role, of how you can participate in this process. Any questions on the accreditation process? Okay. We continue to be asked to help. Kevin Bottenball and Deb Wolf journeyed up to City College of San Francisco a week ago today, or today, yeah, it was a week ago today, to share their story, their experience, and what we did in terms of the approach we took in terms of addressing the standards. And really their message is all about collaboration. It's about people laying down swords and getting rid of blame games and deciding we all own the problem, therefore we have an obligation collectively to fix it. And that's really what we're seeing there. We're also getting that kind of sense from what we heard this morning from College of Sequoias are some of the issues that are deeply buried and with colleges that are having difficult time in compliance issues. It's about whose fault is it, and we have to get past that. We got past it. They need to get past it, and hopefully our encouragement and our strategy will help them to achieve that on their own campuses. So we had COS here today, and then I believe Deb is going to be presenting at Pierce College on April 19th with Greg and Sally, right, okay. And again, it's another way in which we're participating in helping other colleges achieve, because there's still a big issue around the student learning outcomes and program outcomes that many colleges are still either struggling with or still resisting. And so every opportunity that we can help as to what worked for us, getting the right people in the right process, and then getting people in the right frame of mind of how it has to be done and why it has to be done is really critical. So people will continue to participate. We still have a lot of people participating on visiting teams to other colleges for comprehensive reviews. Sandy McLaughlin was at she's currently at Imperial Valley College down in beautiful Brawley or someplace. No, I don't know where it is. And Tony Summer just got back from Gavilan College, and Kevin's going to Coastline College. And I was at Ventura College for my second follow-up visit for them. They were on sanction. But we have more people now participating in the process, which is a good learning curve. So now with that, I'm going to turn this session over to John Cascamo. He's chairing an attempt in working on the revision of the mission statement. Again, as I mentioned earlier, this is a critical piece of our ability to continue our integrated planning process, because if you remember from the image of our integrated planning model, what drives everything at the top of the flow chart is the mission statement. And so he's going to share with you and his partners here, Greg Baxley and Kat Cater. Who else is here with your group? Is that who's here? And Karen, thank you, and Karen. So, John, I'll turn it over to you, and thank you for your attention.
Well, thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here today. And as Dr. Stork indicated, we are members of the ad hoc group that have been working on the mission statement. And it's our pleasure to share it with you here today. And give me a moment to get the computer. I'd like to just kind of introduce this with the process of how we got to where we are at. And that is during the fall 2012 semester, there was an open forum that was held to discuss the district's mission statement, to gather input, and begin the process of mission statement review. Now, it's interesting, if you look at the integrated planning manual, it doesn't actually call for a rewrite of the mission, but it does call for the establishment of an ad hoc group. And after we participated in that forum, the ad hoc group was formed, we took the evaluation and went ahead and proposed a draft that we'll be getting to you shortly. In January, the ad hoc group was formed and again charged with the developing of a process for gathering district-wide feedback and submitting a proposal to the College Council. Again, since district feedback was already gotten as far back as the fall term, we were somewhat well ahead of the curve. To date, we've presented to College Council, to the Management Senate, to Academic Senate. We're presenting here in the venue of an open forum. We're talking to the Associated Students tomorrow. CCFT has been sent the material. Am I missing anyone, Greg? An accreditation steering committee. So we're doing our best as a group to really reach out and get as much input and discussion as possible. Just want to kind of put a shout out to everybody who's participated. Membership included Greg Baxley, Karen Reyes, Kat Cater, Bill Demarest, Roland Finger, and Pamela Ralston. And really want to say that it's been a wonderful group to work with, and hopefully you'll like the direction that we're headed. In March, which we're in now, we're going to be at the end looking over all of the different discussions that we've had with the various constituent groups, including the discussions that we have today. And in April, we're going to go forward to College Council and submit to them a draft. And the College Council will ultimately forward a recommendation to the superintendent president. And that also, well, this is where we're at with our proposed mission statement. I'm going to go ahead and read it. An inclusive institution, Cuesta College inspires students to achieve diverse educational goals. We effectively support students in their effort to improve foundational skills, transfer to a four-year institution, and earn a certificate or an associate degree and advance in the workforce. Through exceptional and challenging learning opportunities, Cuesta College improves lives by promoting cultural, intellectual, and professional growth. We educate students to contribute to their communities, our nation, and the world. And then what follows here, and will kind of give us a sense of structure to our discussion, are footnotes. And I want to again thank Greg Baxley. He had a lot of foresight in working with the committee. He decided that by putting footnotes and addressing how we came up with a particular language, it would serve us well when we're having these discussions so that folks would know the thought that was put into it. Now, unfortunately, I have bullet points instead of numbering, but we have some packets that have that you can look at this in hard copy. Kat, where are those? they're over in the chair if anyone would like to follow along in hard copy. But now what I'd like to do is kind of, well, let's go through the kind of, I could go through individually, or we could kind of open this up for discussion. I think I'm going to open it up for discussion. It doesn't look like a very talkative audience, though, and our hope is to get some input. So, Greg, maybe you can pepper the crowd some way?
Oh, yeah, I'll pepper.
Okay.
Yeah. So I've been to, this is the fourth group that we presented our draft mission statement. I just wanted to explain a little bit about how we're going to go about dealing with the feedback. So we've gotten feedback already from College Council, the Accreditation Steering Committee, and the Academic Senate Council, and John mentioned a couple other groups we're going to get feedback from. We're going to take all of that feedback at the end of the month and come up with probably a revised draft of the mission statement to share with the College Council and the Academic Senate. So your feedback is important. Mostly and hopefully we'll get feedback on, is this really what you want the mission of this college to be? Because that's the most important part. Some of the wordsmithing stuff we can deal with on our own, but the important elements are, is this what we want our mission to be? Are there things that we've missed? Are there things that we've included that aren't so important to the campus community? What do we really want our mission to be? And then we'll take that feedback and come up with a revised draft that everyone will get a chance to look at. And the way we got to the words that we've used in the mission statement weren't just in response to the accreditation standards and the educational code and the Chancellor's Office's mission for us, but also all the feedback that was provided during the fall workshop. In the packet of information that Kat's provided for us, there are 5 pages of comments that, was it you, Casey? Did you type all that out? No, I collated it. Oh. But Casey helped collate all the information from those workshops, pages and pages of those great big, comically large sticky notes. And so we took those 5 pages, we looked at all that feedback, we looked at example mission statements from other colleges, and we came up with the language that we did. So if you were at that workshop in the fall, we read through those comments, we tried to pick out some of those words and put them in the draft mission statement that are here. So Lisa's walking around with the microphone. If people have comments on the content, or even the wording is fine, about the current mission statement, is this what you want the mission to be? Now's the time to let us know. Todd's got a comment.
Comment, question. You said it's important to note that, public feedback on what we want the college to be, what we want it to be. I would somewhat disagree with that and say that it should be what it needs to be, but still try to fit what we would like that to look like into the mission statement. I don't know if you follow. I don't know if I'm saying that right or not.
I think you're trying to address whether it's what you in particular want our mission to be for the college versus what our college really should be in terms of its mission. And yeah, it's sort of a delicate issue. Well, I don't want to tell you that your vision of the college isn't right. It looks like John has something to say, so.
I don't want to interrupt your chain of thought, but I think there may be a couple of different ways to approach this. And I dare say, just from my perspective, that I approach this with the attitude or the point of view that I think that you're expressing. We're already defined as a community college by, California of, to a certain extent what our mission is. And I think this mission statement serves to kind of concretize and enumerate what we do in such a way that it expresses who we are with regard to being a public, funded educational enterprise. But we also tried, and this is the nuanced or the more delicate part, to put some kind of stamp of Cuesta on it. And, so when we talk about how we do things, or that we want things that we're striving for, and who we serve and how we go about it, that becomes the wordsmithing piece. But I think, if I dare say so, that this mission statement does concretize the services that we provide to the community. And based on the feedback and discussions we have, there were some folks who thought that the previous mission statement didn't accomplish that.
Oh, and I was one. I thought the last mission statement was heinous, but Yeah, what you said is that there are requirements of what we need it to be. How would you like to see us meet that? I mean, that's what you're asking us to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Other questions, comments?
I think it's a good piece of work, by the way.
I just have one question. So how would we know if we met this mission?
How do we know what?
How would we know if we met our mission? This, as it's currently written, how would we measure that we are an inclusive institution?
That's a really good question, Ryan. Do you have any ideas?
I don't, but I just think that we should be able to answer that probably.
Yeah. When we look at other mission statements for other colleges, you could ask the same question of pretty much all of those. How do you really know a college meets its mission statement? And that's one of the accreditation standards. And when you read self-evaluation reports, they kind of gloss over it. We're an inclusive institution because we let everyone in. We don't kick anyone out. Maybe Gil's got some ideas being on visiting teams.
Well, it's an interesting question, Ryan, and the way I look at this statement, the inclusive part is really a way of saying that we're open to everybody and that we don't exclusively eliminate a particular segment of our population, either by age, gender, race, or whatever. So we are inclusive. Where we become exclusive sometimes is by the programs and services that we either can or cannot offer. But in terms of our open enrollment institution philosophy in California, it allows us to be inclusive. But it also means that we make a concerted effort to reach out to those non-traditional populations who by choice wouldn't necessarily walk in the door, who need encouragement and need to be cultivated into seeing what we can do to help them achieve their diverse educational goal. The achievement of goals is measurable, and that's one of the things that we're going to be held accountable for in our compliance issues is about outcomes and about people and a number of certificates, degrees, and transfers, and so on. So I think that part will be measurable. And I think the inclusive is measured by just looking at your student demographics and your underrepresented areas in conformance or in comparison to the population distribution within our service area.
I think once we get past the word inclusive, there's lots of measurable components in the mission statement. So we can ask our students if we inspire them. And faculty and staff can answer that qualitatively as well. Do we see that our students seem to be inspired? So we can have two ways of addressing that. We can determine if we offer challenging learning environments for our students. And again, we can ask them when we compare ourselves as faculty and staff to other colleges in the state, does our curriculum match up? Is it challenging? We can answer those kinds of questions. We can answer questions of, do we promote your professional intellectual growth? Again, by asking students or by looking at how they progress through courses. So once we get past the word inclusive, I think there's lots of measurable stuff.
A couple of the measurable things I was considering when we looked at this are statistically, are we reflective of the community we live in? So if we're looking at cultural diversity, we can see that pretty easily, though we may not be as representative as we would like to be in general terms, so our students have cross-cultural exposure. When we look at the data compared to our community, we're generally pretty much in alignment with our community. I'll get to it, Ryan. And then the other thing is, when it comes to meeting their diverse educational goals, sometimes our data may not be accurate. I think because we're not always careful to make sure that our students are declaring their actual educational goal. So they may be putting an AA when really what they're after is a certificate, or they're saying they want to transfer, but they're not including the fact that they're going to get an AA along the way. And that's an institutional issue where all of us who work with students can help guide our students to appropriately making sure that their declared goals are their intentional goals? And you had a comment?
Well, first I wanted to say that I think there are many measurable things. I guess it's the inclusive one, and Karen just mentioned, are we reflective of our service community? And I guess that part is not clear to me from that definition, what our service community is. And I bring this up because it was an issue, and I've been on accreditation teams, and it's been an issue that it's not defined. So it's hard to do environmental scanning. Greg and I talked about this a little bit, that we're not really defining a geographic area. We serve the world, but we serve people with those particular goals, transfer, basic skills, and degree. So that was my question. Does it direct us enough to define what our population is?
And when we were meeting as an ad hoc committee, that's an interesting point for everyone else. You may have discussed this with Greg, is we actually talked about that very issue. Should we define a geographic area in our mission statement? And one of the things that kind of causes to pull back from that is because, especially with the addition of a greater number of distance education classes, our geographic area is expanding. So though we have a service community, our geographic boundaries aren't as firm as they used to be.
This is a slight different take on your question, but one of the reasons why I would say that the wording in an inclusive institution has value is that it gives the mission statement something to be questioned. For instance, we had feedback from one faculty member in Academic Senate who didn't like the word because she felt that recently services to certain disabled students had been limited and that we weren't as inclusive as we purport to be. But I would offer that by naming us and describing us as an inclusive institution, when we make an action or make a decision, it can be measured against that statement. So I think that there's a variety of different ways to approach what I think is, a wonderful question, and that is, how do you know you've accomplished your mission? And I think that if we look at a lot of this wording, we find that it gives us a test of ourselves. Are we inclusive? Are we doing this? And I want to say that we are already experimenting with a draft 5. This would be our 4th iteration. But we wanted to consistently present this to all of the communities and constituency groups within the college. I do have to say that the themes that I see the most currently, and then my colleagues will be, also, welcome to address it, are questions about how do we define who we serve. There's a question of also how do we address distance education, and we've looked at this from a couple of different ways, and I don't know that we have fully resolved what the ultimate draft that we bring to College Council will be, but these are themes that are kind of becoming, very apparent throughout our discussions. And then within the whole aspect of community, and again, service district and geography, there's been lots of back and forth discussion about, do we talk about ourselves in one entity? Do we call out our different service modalities or educational modalities, and do we call out our centers? So all of these have been discussed in the group, and we're kind of recording and taking the input that you provide. So if any of those triggered, additional feelings or thoughts, please let us know.
If you look at the word inclusive, it means that you're meeting the needs of a variety of students. So it could, beyond the demographics, but it could also mean that we have classes that are hands-on in the classroom, but also then accommodating those students who cannot be here physically, and, by offering the distance ed. So that's kind of inclusive that way, being able to meet the needs. So, in a flip side versus, where we live, Just a comment.
We-
Gary?
We're addressing in that proposed mission statement the students and the faculty and so forth, but I would also include from the accreditation what we have done or what we have become over these years. Transparency is one of them, and integrity. Because we, like Dr. Stork said, we lived up to it, we owned up to it. And I think it's important to address the community as well in a mission statement, you know, instead of to their communities. I would just include that as well, because I think it's really, really important. Because before we had this negative image, and I think by using, you know, action verbs such as transparency, and, you know, I think that would be a good idea to include.
We've taken a note. Thanks for the feedback. Shannon? Gary, you were making some weird hand signals up in North County.
Weird is a subjective term, Greg. It was a
I'm sticking with weird.
indication that we couldn't hear the speaker, so then the mic went to the speaker and we were able to hear her, so all's fine now. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, well, Lisa sat in front of me, so I'm going to move over. What I got hung up on the very first an inclusive institution, comma, and then I stopped. And for me, I really want to see that in another place on the mission statement, because it seems like the top part we're talking about the things we aspire to do. We're going to have the students come in and learn, and then down below it's about exceptional, challenging learning opportunities. And I feel that that area might be more about the inclusive institution, because then I stopped and I started asking all these questions that everybody's asking. Well, what does that mean? And not about, you know, like our goal, like what's our mission. So I love this. This is like so much better than the one that we have now. But I felt like I got cut up on that little, just those 3 words at the very beginning. Like, does that just define us the most, or is it the fact that we're teaching and that we're helping students achieve their goals? Is that the most important thing? And I thought that may be more appropriate down below, where we talk about the different circumstances and different types of people that come in the door and the different ways we teach them, which is in the second paragraph. And that was basically my only input from the first iteration, but you guys might have already addressed that in your next draft. So,
Just as a mental exercise, short person, just as a mental exercise, if you flip the paragraphs, does that speak better to you?
No, I don't think
Or
so.
do you still get hung up on those 3
Yeah,
words?
I kind of wanted to take that, say, Cuesta College inspires students to achieve diverse educational goals. Boom, as a public member or a community member or somebody coming new to the college, I know what that is. But I really would like to say maybe as an inclusive institution, we educate students to contribute, or as an inclusive institution, we, you know, something that's like a secondary to that. I felt like I got hung up on that, and I kind of turned on my educationalese snooze button when I saw that. You know, I don't know if you guys know what I mean, but you know what I mean. Like, you're like, oh, there's another, you know, education speak type of a mission statement. And I know this is so much better than what it was. I kind of felt bad pointing that out, but I just felt like that always having my hat on both sides of the house, internal and external, I just wanted to bring that up as a possibility of improvement.
There's no reason to feel bad about shredding our mission statement draft. It's okay.
One of the reasons why this group has been so wonderful to work with is that we have been able to look at things in a couple of different ways. And again, when you say that, you're bringing a good perspective. I think for more grammatical reasons, we received, some comments recently about, leading off with "and inclusive." So there's a variety of different ways to look at this. In our next draft, just tease everybody a little bit. It believes with Cuesta College, then followed by an inclusive institution. Again, it's a real wrestle to try to fit within the parameters of having a tightly worded statement that says a whole lot and still meets the external requirements, and still somehow serves to motivate, both students, faculty, and staff. And, one of the criteria, we'd like this to be at least something memorable where you may not know it word for word, but that you would know what we stand for. So again, we welcome and encourage dialogue to occur.
I had one comment that Cuesta College inspires students to achieve diverse educational goals. Presumes that they already know what their goal is when they're coming to us, but I think part of what we do, especially in counseling, is help identify what that goal is and get them on the track if they're going to transfer or get their certificate. That came up today as far as students applying. They can opt on their educational goal to say decline to state or unknown, and then when they get here, they need to identify that goal, as Karen was saying, and they need to update it, but a lot of times they don't know what it is, and part of what our mission is to help them identify their goal and achieve that goal. That's my comment.
Great, thanks for the feedback. If you're going to ask a question, you better do it quick.
Yeah, you do, because they can't hear you in Paso.
I just wanted to piggyback off of what she just said. I was thinking the same thing, and I was thinking as an inclusive institution would include students who arrive without a goal, and a lot of our students arrive without a goal. And so as an inclusive institution, we would serve the needs of students without an identified goal until they find one. And then that would add to the supporting students in their efforts. So if a student doesn't have a goal, their efforts cannot be fully supported, or if we haven't identified them as a goal-specific student, then how are we supporting them if we're only supporting through the avenue of goals? So I would say, I would add inspiring students to identify and achieve educational goals.
Keep in mind, though, we're sort of working on a word limit, or not to make it too long. And so I don't want to argue with your idea. We'll work on it. But other things we've considered as comments, we have thought about, well, if we're helping students achieve a goal, wrapped into that is identifying the goal that they need to achieve. And so it might not be exactly spelled out, all the little steps a student might need to get to achieving their goal. But we might have to decide it's just included in those words. But we'll work on that for sure. All right, thanks everybody.
Going back to what Amy said, one of the things we help students do, their goal might be to find a goal. And that'd be the most important thing we help them do, is to identify what that goal is. Whether they achieve it or not, at least they have some direction they can accomplish in various different avenues. It could be here, it could be somewhere else. But, well, what happened today is exactly what I was hoping would happen. And John, even though, as was kind of preempted and prefaced, this group saying this doesn't look like to be a talkative group, there are a lot of good ideas that came out of this group today. And I think you've identified a lot of the things that the task force and ad hoc group has been hearing about, some of the stumbling blocks. An inclusive institution. And the first time I read that, I just stopped at that point. First of all, I had to think about what that meant, before I launched into the rest of it. But it can be, you can still capture the idea, and I think they're moving towards a different way of phrasing that, which will really help clarify the overall goal. So. Well, thank you for participating in this. Even though we have this thing going on in groups, we don't necessarily have an open forum to be able to respond and listen to people who may not be sitting in a particular governance committee to be able to respond and react to the question at hand. So anyway, it's a sunny day. We had headlines in the paper, so all is good. So have a great rest of the day. Thank you.